If tomorrow the Ten Commandments vanished from the memory of all humankind, what would happen? You wake up one morning and step outside. No one remembers the concept of, "You shall not kill." No one recalls the command, "You shall not steal." The very words once considered the foundation of morality suddenly disappear as if they never existed. What do you think the world would look like? You might say, wonderful, humanity is finally free, no longer chained by those ancient restrictions. But are you sure? Freedom or chaos, liberation or destruction? Picture some simple scenes in daily life. A store where there is no trust between the seller and the buyer. A child who no longer knows what it means to honor parents. A husband and wife who no longer see faithfulness as important. A society with no boundary between right and wrong. At first you might think it feels like a relief. No more strict rules, no more sense of guilt. People can do whatever they want, say whatever they want, act however they want, not forbidden, but permitted. And yet you begin to feel that something is off. When everything is permitted, then nothing can be truly right. When boundaries disappear, there is no real freedom left. When evil is no longer named as evil, it easily disguises itself as normal. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, once said that human beings never escape the darkness. We can only learn how to master it. The Ten Commandments, in one perspective, are like a fence that keeps the shadow, the dark side within the human soul, from spilling over and taking control of life. If that fence is gone, will the darkness drown us all? And you know what? Sometimes we only recognize the true value of something when it is gone. The Ten Commandments may be ancient lines carved into stone tablets. But imagine for a moment a world without them. You would realize that perhaps those very things we think are restrictions are the foundation holding society together so it does not collapse. This video will take you on a journey of imagination. One by one, each commandment vanishes, and with each one, another layer of order falls apart. And in the end, you will face a truth that may make you look at your own life differently. Are you ready? When faith becomes a commodity. Imagine a world where the commandment worship only one God disappears. There is no longer a single spiritual anchor, no longer a reminder to place trust in the Most High. What will people do? They will seek another kind of faith, but it will not be sacred faith. It will be a counterfeit, not the worship of the soul, but the worship of material things. Money becomes the new idol. Technology becomes the ruler of the age. Fame, power, and popularity, these all become the gods erected for people to bow down to. You can already see this happening today. People may spend their entire lives chasing money, yet cannot spare even 1 hour to listen to their own inner voice. People obsess over upgrading to the newest phone, buying a newer car, building a bigger house, as if those are the true measures of human worth. And yet inside, emptiness keeps gnawing. Not happiness, but an invisible obsession. One famous singer once confessed, "I had everything, money, lights, applause, but when night came I felt hollow inside." That is the tragedy of misplaced faith. When your idol is wrong, your entire life veers off course. In Jungian psychology, the self-archetype is the center of the entire soul. It is the place where all the fragments of the human being come together in harmony. It is the point that connects us with the sacred, with what transcends the ego. When we worship one God, it is a symbolic way of placing the self at the center. But when this commandment disappears, the self loses its position. That space is seized by false gods, and these false gods are not spirits but illusions. They promise happiness but deliver only addiction. They offer a sense of power but leave only dependence. They satisfy the ego but kill the soul. Jung once warned, when human beings replace the image of the sacred with false idols, the collective unconscious will slowly become distorted. We think we are in control, but in truth, they control us. You think you are using technology, But technology is shaping how you think, how you love, how you live. You think you own money, but in reality, money owns you. It's not that we have it, but that it has us. In a society without this commandment, the worship of material things rises to the throne. Festivals are no longer moments of spiritual connection, but turn into shopping battles. Temples and churches are no longer places of stillness, but photo backdrops for social media. Young people no longer ask, "Who am I?" but only, "How many followers do I have?" And then humanity falls into an endless spiral. The more we chase false idols, the emptier we feel. The more we gain, the more we sense a void. The higher we climb, the deeper the abyss beneath our feet. Remember this: the essence of faith is not to inflate the ego, but to set it free. Not to find another idol outside of us, but to connect with the power within. That is why the 10 Commandments place this command at the very beginning. You shall worship only one God. Not because God seeks exclusive worship, but because he knows that if people scatter their trust among countless false idols, their souls will shatter. It is not jealousy, but protection, not restriction, but guidance. So what is the lesson? Faith is what shapes an entire life. If you place it in the wrong spot, you will walk the wrong path. If you hand it to false idols, you will lose yourself. Only when you keep your center, connected to the sacred, to what transcends the ego, will you discover true wholeness. 2. No more basic moral boundaries. Imagine a world where the words, "You shall not kill, you shall not steal," vanish completely from human memory. Today, you step onto the street. A man snatches your wallet in broad daylight in the middle of a crowd, but no one looks, no one reacts, because they no longer see it as wrong. Not a crime, but just another ordinary act. In another corner, a fight breaks out. Blood spills on the sidewalk. The one who caused the death lifts his head high without the slightest trace of guilt, because in his mind there is no longer any idea that killing is a sin, not cruelty, but merely an instinct for survival. Now think of a child growing up in this world. No books that teach morality, no parents saying, "That is wrong." The child grows up believing that doing whatever it takes to get what you want is justified. That is no longer an innocent child, but a creature learning to survive in the wilderness. In society, these commandments are the invisible foundation. When they vanish, people no longer know where the boundaries lie. The strong will crush the weak. The cunning will take advantage of the gentle. The law of the jungle replaces the law of humanity, and this is where Jungian psychology offers a profound explanation. In Jung's thought, every human being carries the shadow, the dark part that contains instincts of violence, greed, and desire. What keeps the shadow from breaking loose is the father archetype, the symbol of law, discipline, and authority. The father archetype is that inner voice whispering, "Stop, this is wrong." When the commandments are gone, that symbol is stripped away. When the father is gone, the darkness rises freely. Remember, the shadow is not the enemy, but it is always waiting for its chance. It is like a wolf in the forest, ready to leap out and bite the moment the door is left unlatched. And when humanity no longer has "you shall not kill, you shall not steal" as a warning, the door has been thrown wide open. You might think, but we still have the law. True, but the law is only a rigid frame on the outside. The commandments are the fire within. Law can punish, but it cannot replace the feeling of guilt. It is the commandments that make people stop before committing evil, because they believe it is wrong, not merely because they fear getting caught, not fear of punishment, but the voice of conscience. And if the commandments vanish, people are left with only one motivation: how not to get caught. They will cheat as long as they can hide it. They will commit violence as long as no one witnesses it, not guided by righteousness, but by trickery. That world would no longer have order, no longer have justice, only chaos disguised as freedom. Look at our society today. Even while the Ten Commandments are still present, we already see violence, greed, and deceit everywhere. So if the commandments vanish completely, what will stop the flood of darkness? Jung once said, "Whoever looks into the darkness without trembling will be consumed by that darkness." We need living laws, we need boundaries, not to take away freedom, but to protect it. Because freedom without boundaries is not liberation, it is self-destruction. 3. The collapse of the family. Honor your father and mother, one of the most important commandments, suddenly vanishes from human memory. Tomorrow, what would you see? A child grows up never hearing words about gratitude toward parents. No one reminds them that parents are the source, the ones who sacrifice their entire lives for them. In their mind, parents are no longer pillars, but simply two people who happened to be there when they were born. Not a blessing, but a burden. Picture a morning inside a home. An elderly mother quietly washes dishes, her hands trembling. Her son scrolls through his phone, not bothering to look at her even once. There are no words like, "Mom, thank you," only a silent disregard. Because to him, honoring parents is no longer a standard. Not ingratitude, just normal. What would a society without honoring parents look like? Nursing homes overcrowded, elderly parents abandoned with no visits from their children, homes without the laughter of family gatherings, only cold apartments where each person lives for themselves. Jung once emphasized that family is part of the collective unconscious. Family is not just the place of birth, but a symbol of roots, of the continuation of tradition. When a child respects parents, they are not just respecting individuals, but respecting the very continuity of humanity. On the other hand, when that connection is cut, human beings lose their sense of belonging. Not rooted, but adrift. In Jungian psychoanalysis, parents embody the archetype of the nurturer, the symbol of nourishment and protection. When children honor their parents, it means they accept guidance, care, and even limits. When this disappears, the child no longer sees anything sacred in family. They see only barriers, not kinship, but fragmentation. Look at today's society, even while the commandment still exists. We already see many places where the culture of honoring parents is fading, children busy with careers and money, forgetting the aging parents waiting for a phone call. If the commandment vanishes completely, then the final thread holding families together will be severed. And when the family collapses, society trembles as well. Because family is where humans learn their very first lessons about morality, love, and forgiveness. If the family no longer plants those seeds, the young will grow up with incomplete souls, unable to love, unable to feel gratitude, unable to respect, not whole human beings, but individuals who only know themselves. What would such a society look like? Filled with people who are free but lonely, filled with individuals who look strong on the outside but are hollow within, filled with generations following one another but no longer passing down values. Not a community, but fragments. Jung once wrote, "Man becomes himself only when he connects with his collective roots." Those roots begin with family. A child who honors parents will be grateful for life. A person grateful for life will treat others with kindness, and only then can society endure. So what is the lesson? Family is the long-lasting moral foundation, irreplaceable. You can build skyscrapers that touch the sky, but if the foundation is weak, the entire structure will collapse. You can be as modern as you want, but if you forget your roots, you will be nothing more than uprooted trees in a storm. The commandment, "Honor your father and mother," may be only a short sentence, but it is the thread connecting past to present, humanity to its source, today's generation to tomorrow's. Without that thread, we lose ourselves. 4. The collapse of social trust. If the commandment, "You shall not bear false witness," were to vanish, what would happen? A contract signed between two parties would become nothing more than a worthless piece of paper. A promise would be nothing more than fleeting sound. An oath would carry no weight to hold anyone accountable. There would be no truth, only deception. Imagine buying a house. The seller hands you documents with a friendly smile, but behind them lies a web of lies. You transfer the money, and the next day you discover the house never belonged to them. You lose everything, yet no one sees it as a crime, because bearing false witness is no longer forbidden. Imagine a marriage. Two people exchange vows of faithfulness, but in this world, those vows are just a joke. People can betray at any moment without the slightest shame. Not love, but a temporary transaction. And in politics, the consequences would be even more devastating. Leaders promise anything to win votes, but have no intention of keeping their word. The people lose trust. A society without truth is a society plunged into darkness. In Jungian psychology, when truth disappears, the trickster archetype rises. The trickster is the deceiver, the destroyer, the one who uses cunning to get what he wants. At some level, the trickster can bring laughter, surprise, even creativity. But when it dominates an entire society, it becomes a disaster, because society can only exist when there is shared trust. That trust does not rest only on legal documents, but in the human heart. I believe what you say is true. A handshake, a promise, a nod of agreement, all rely on trust. When trust vanishes, every transaction demands control, evidence, cameras, and courts. Everything becomes heavy, complicated, unstable. Think about the economy. If truth disappears, commerce collapses. Who dares invest in a business whose financial records could be falsified at any moment? Who dares lend money if they cannot believe the borrower will repay? Without trust, money itself becomes nothing more than meaningless paper. In daily life, you would feel this collapse in every moment. A friend says, "I will come," but does not show up. A colleague says, "I will do it," but never does. A spouse vows, "I will stay with you," but walks away when hardship comes. Not truth but masks. And Jung warned, when the trickster takes over, the human soul falls into inner chaos. Because truth is not only necessary for society to exist, it is necessary for the soul to be at peace. When you live in lies, you are not only betraying others, you are betraying yourself. A society where lies become the norm will devour even the innocent. The honest will be seen as fools. The upright will be eliminated. Only the deceivers survive, but even they never know peace. Remember this: truth may wound, but it sets free. A lie may comfort, but it enslaves. Truth may hurt for a moment, but lies kill slowly. That is why the commandment, "You shall not bear false witness," is not just a religious rule. It is the foundation upon which trust is sustained. Without trust, there is no community. Without community, there is no humanity. So what is the lesson? Society cannot stand on law alone. Law can punish, but only trust binds people together. Trust is the invisible glue, the red thread that ties fragments into a strong fabric. And if trust collapses, it is not only the collapse of society, it is the collapse of the human soul itself. 5. Freedom misunderstood. Imagine a society where the commandment about faithfulness, about mutual respect in marriage and in love, disappears. Adultery is no longer seen as wrong. Betrayal is no longer called betrayal. Deceiving your spouse is viewed only as personal freedom. At first, this might sound like liberation. Finally, I can do whatever I want without being bound by ancient rules. But look closer. It is not freedom, it is indulgence. It is not love, it is selfish desire. In everyday life, the consequences show clearly. A husband easily abandons his wife simply because another relationship seems more attractive. A wife sees betrayal as a right of freedom, with no sense of guilt. Children growing up in that brokenness no longer believe in love, no longer believe in marriage. The family, the very cell of society, erodes little by little. Now widen the perspective beyond the family. At work, freedom is misunderstood as the right to falsify reports, steal ideas, or sabotage colleagues to get what you want. In society, freedom becomes do whatever you want, regardless of consequences, and the world begins to drown in chaos. Carl Jung called this phenomenon ego inflation, the ego expanding so much that it devours the balance of the soul. The ego is necessary for humans to recognize themselves, but when it swells too large, it overshadows the self, the center of inner harmony. At that point, people no longer seek balance, but only chase personal gratification, not growth, but decline. Jung once wrote, "When the ego believes it is everything, that is when tragedy begins." When people mistake indulgence for freedom, the ego has swallowed the soul. They think they are truly living, but in reality, they are losing themselves. Think about a young person in this society. He believes freedom means no boundaries, loving whomever he wants, leaving whomever he wants. He drifts from one relationship to another, never stopping, never truly connecting. On the outside, he seems free, but on the inside, he is lonely, empty. Not freedom, but the chains of desire. True freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want. True freedom is the ability to choose what is right, even when instinct pushes you to do what is wrong. Not following instinct, but mastering it. Not tearing down boundaries, but placing them in the right place. An artist can paint anything he wants. But when he disciplines himself, following certain principles, the artwork takes form and gains power. Freedom in art is not random scribbles, but the union of creativity and discipline. In the same way, freedom in life is not indulgence, but responsibility. Look at history. Thriving societies have never been built on indulgence, but on disciplined freedom. Freedom tied to civic responsibility, to shared morality, to law. This is what keeps society standing. If the commandment about faithfulness and honesty in relationships disappears, then that very foundation collapses too. Society would be full of people who think they are free, but are in fact enslaved by their ego. A culture reduced to fragments of the self. So what is the lesson? Freedom is not the destruction of all limits. Freedom is not living by instinct. True freedom is the harmony between desire and discipline, between rights and responsibilities, between the self and the collective. Freedom is not indulgence. Freedom is the ability to choose what is right, even when you have the power to choose what is wrong. 6. A moral crisis among the young. Imagine a world where moral standards no longer exist. Young people grow up without being taught what is right and what is wrong. No reminders such as, do not cheat, do not betray, live with responsibility. No anchor, no guiding light. In such a world, the youth drift like ships without a compass. They race through the darkness of desire, ambition, and temptation, but have no idea where the harbor is. Not a journey of maturity, but a meaningless wandering. Look at today's reality. Even while moral standards still exist, the rate of depression among young people is higher than ever. Many feel life is meaningless, drowning in loneliness, despite being surrounded by thousands of digital connections. Many turn to drugs, alcohol, or reckless sexuality to fill the emptiness inside. Not true joy, but temporary escape. If the 10 Commandments disappear completely, this emptiness will be even more terrifying. Young people will no longer know that honor your parents, do not steal, do not kill, are the very foundations. They will grow up without a spiritual compass, not responsible citizens, but individuals chasing only instinct and desire. In Jungian psychology, this loss is called the collapse of the God archetype, the symbol of the sacred, of transcendence. The God archetype is like a lantern guiding the collective unconscious. It reminds us that we do not live only for ourselves, but for something greater. When this symbol is lost, people fall into an existential vacuum, a void of meaning. Inside that void, despair easily takes root. When there is no reason to live, each day becomes nothing more than empty repetition. A young man may achieve financial success, yet still feel hollow inside. A young woman may be famous on social media, but when the screen turns off, only loneliness surrounds her. Not happiness, but exhaustion. Jung once said, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life. If he lacks meaning, he will invent it, through alcohol, drugs, sex, or violence." And that is exactly what happens when the younger generation has no moral compass. They will cling to false beliefs, to shallow idols, trying to fill the void. But the more they hold on to the wrong idols, the deeper they sink into crisis. You can already see it in online communities. Many young people scream for recognition. They are willing to do anything to be noticed, from dangerous stunts to acts of self-destruction, because in their hearts there is no solid value to cling to. If parents are the symbol of roots, then the God archetype is the symbol of the sky. Young people need both, to know where they come from and to know where they are headed. Lose one and they lose balance. Lose both and they collapse. Think about history. Every thriving civilization gave its youth a compass, a code of law, a belief system, a set of values. That is what taught them why they live, for whom they live, and for something greater than themselves. If that compass vanishes, the young will become shattered boats, broken on the sea of life. So what is the lesson? Every generation needs a spiritual lantern. The young do not only need technology, money, or careers, they need a value system, a belief that lifts them beyond themselves, not to restrain, but to sustain, not to chain, but to free them from emptiness. A generation without moral standards is a lost generation. But a generation illuminated by a spiritual compass will have the power to rewrite the future. 7. When law loses its soul. Modern law is still built on fundamental principles. You shall not kill, you shall not steal, you shall not lie. These principles may seem obvious, but their roots come from the 10 Commandments. We often forget this because today law has become a massive system with thousands of statutes and millions of documents. But if the moral foundation disappears, then that entire system becomes like a building without a foundation. Imagine a world where laws still exist, but are no longer tied to human conscience. Police still make arrests, courts still hold trials, prisons still confine. But in people's minds, obeying the law is no longer about respect for justice. It is only about fear of punishment. Not justice, just coercion. How would such a society function? People would constantly look for loopholes, for ways to cheat, to exploit the cracks. Businesses might evade taxes with clever tricks. Officials could commit corruption without a trace of shame. Ordinary citizens might break the law as long as they are confident no one sees them. Law would no longer be a fence of protection, but a mental game where the clever win. Jung described law, order, and fairness as part of the father archetype, the symbol of the protective father. In this role, law is not only a stick of punishment, but also the arm that preserves order, teaching people right from wrong. When the 10 Commandments disappear, this image of the protective father fades. Law then is no longer a father, but only a whip. No longer a place of protection, but only a source of fear. Picture a child growing up with a father who only beats but never teaches. That child may obey out of fear, but will never hold respect, never build trust. They will always seek hidden resistance or learn to lie just to avoid punishment. That is exactly the image of a society when law loses its moral soul. Consider a simple example. You are driving on the road. If you obey traffic laws only because you fear a fine, then when no police are present, you will speed and drive recklessly. But if you truly believe in your heart that safe driving protects the lives of others, then even without anyone watching, you will still choose to do what is right. That is the difference between law with a soul and law without one. History has already proven this. There have been dictatorships that enforced extremely strict legal systems. But because those laws were not based on universal moral foundations, they became tools of oppression. The people did not live in justice, but in fear. Such societies cannot endure because laws enforced only by the whip will eventually collapse when fear loses its power. Jung once said, man needs a framework to keep the chaos of the unconscious from spilling out. But that framework must be sustained by meaning. Otherwise, it is only a prison. This reminds us that law only has true value when tied to collective conscience, with the belief that it is right, not only that it is required. If the 10 Commandments disappear, and the moral foundation dissolves, then law becomes nothing more than a cold machine. It still exists, but like a body without a soul. Society then would no longer have justice, only lifeless courtrooms, mechanical verdicts, and people twisting the law just to survive. So what is the lesson? Law cannot exist independently. It needs a soul. That soul is morality, shared belief, and the sense of what is right. With a soul, law is a protective father. Without a soul, law is only a whip. And human beings cannot live forever in fear of the whip. We only truly grow when we feel the fairness of the protective father, law infused with a moral soul. 8. A consumer society replacing a spiritual society. Imagine a world where the sacred disappears. No more silence in the church. No more reverence in the temple. No more moments when human beings bow before something greater than themselves. Instead, every festival becomes nothing more than a discount event. Days once tied to sacred meaning, Christmas, Easter, the Buddhist holiday of Vulan, or the full moon of the 7th month, suddenly turn into golden opportunities for sales, for advertising, for boosting profits. Not sacred, only commercial. You can already see this happening today. In many major cities, Christmas is known not for the story of Christ's birth, but for the sparkling lights of shopping malls. People crowd together to buy gifts, chase discounts, take pictures and check in online. But very few still spend time praying, reflecting, or listening to what is sacred. An ancient temple becomes just another tourist attraction. Visitors pray less, but take more photos, posting them online as souvenirs. Not spirituality, only cultural masks. In Jungian psychology, this transformation carries profound meaning. He called it the commercialization of the sacred archetype. The sacred symbol was once a gateway into the collective unconscious, a bridge connecting humanity to the cosmos, a place where the soul found meaning beyond the small self. But when it is turned into a tool for consumption, it ceases to be a window into the infinite and becomes only a mirror reflecting the ego. In other words, the sacred is reduced to the persona, the false mask that covers inner emptiness. People think they are living in the spirit of celebration, but in reality, they are only buying another product, snapping another photo, putting on another mask. Not spiritual connection, only emotional consumption. And what is the result? People become hollow inside. The more they buy, the more they feel they lack. The more they treat festivals as commercial events, the emptier they feel when the lights go out. Not joy, but disappointment. Jung once warned, modern man is losing the sacred, and when the sacred disappears, the soul becomes empty. He will try to fill it with consumption, but the more he consumes, the larger the void becomes. This is true of today's society, and it would be even truer if the 10 Commandments were to vanish entirely. Because the 10 Commandments are not only laws, they are reminders that there are realities beyond personal desires and material benefits. When that reminder disappears, nothing remains to keep people oriented toward the sacred. They will instead worship goods, technology, entertainment, and call those things festivals. A society like that may shine brightly on the outside, but it is hollow within. Cities may glow with lights, but human souls remain in darkness. Festivals may roar with noise, but hearts stay silent. Not vibrancy, but collective exhaustion. So what is the lesson? Human beings need the sacred, not to be restricted, but to be nourished. A society without the sacred quickly becomes a machine of consumption. Everything can be bought and sold, even love, trust, and loyalty. But in that machine, human beings become nothing more than gears, constantly turning, but devoid of meaning. When we lose the sacred, we lose our very soul. Only when we honor the sacred can we escape the mask of consumption and rediscover wholeness. 9. Humanity loses its collective identity. Imagine a world where there is no longer any shared law of life. Each person sets their own standard. One person believes stealing is wrong, while another believes it is simply a survival skill. One person sees marriage as sacred, while another sees it only as a temporary contract. One person trusts in honesty, while another believes deceit is true intelligence. And what is the result? No longer a community, only individuals living by their own rules. Not a unified society, but a broken puzzle full of contradictions. Picture a city. Each house is its own world with its own laws. Your neighbor on the left believes might makes right, while your neighbor on the right believes I can do whatever I want. You live in the middle, never knowing when they might attack or betray you. You are always tense because there is no common standard to rely on. This does not only create chaos, it drives society into extreme division. When there is no shared law, people have only one choice: to form factions. Those who think alike group together against those who think differently. From politics to religion, from economics to culture, every field becomes a battlefield. Not unity, but fragmentation. In Jungian psychology, this happens when society loses its shared myth, the common story. Shared myth is the foundation of the collective consciousness. Every civilization has been bound together by a great story. The Greeks had mythology, the Jews had the Bible, China had Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. The West had Christianity. These stories were not only religious beliefs, they were invisible threads binding millions of people together. When the shared story is lost, people lose the sense of belonging to a collective. They feel they belong only to themselves. Jung once said, "Man cannot exist by his ego alone. He needs a story to merge into." An individual may be strong, but an isolated individual cannot build a society. A society can only endure when each person feels part of something greater than themselves. Look at the modern world. Even while the 10 Commandments still exist, division has already crept everywhere. Social media creates small communities where everyone believes only their own viewpoint is correct. Young people are drawn into opinion bubbles, where everyone thinks alike and anyone different is cast out. If the 10 Commandments disappear entirely, those bubbles will burst, leaving behind a fractured, extreme society where dialogue is impossible. Here is a simple example. If the commandment about honesty is gone, Group A might believe lying is the smart way to survive, while Group B believes truth is the only thing that matters. These two groups will never find common ground because they do not share the same values. And when there is no common ground, violence is almost inevitable. Remember this: humanity does not survive by technology, by money, or by power alone. We endure because we can gather around a shared story. The Greeks told one another their myths. The Jews passed down the laws of God. The Vietnamese told the legend of Lac Long Quan and Ao Co. These stories not only explained origins, they gave people the feeling, we are one. If the shared story disappears, then we disappears. Only me and you remain, opposing, fighting. A humanity without collective identity is like a train where each car goes its own way. and that train will shatter before it ever reaches its destination. So what is the lesson? Humanity needs a shared story in order to survive, not to chain us, but to connect us, not to impose, but to remind us we are not alone, not to erase differences, but to weave them together into a complete tapestry. Lose collective identity, and we lose our very humanity. Only when we share a common story can we truly become human. Discovering the true value of the Ten Commandments. There is a paradox in life. Only when something is lost do people recognize its true value. And with the Ten Commandments, this paradox becomes even clearer. For centuries, many have seen the Ten Commandments as a burden. They say, "Why are there so many prohibitions? Why must we always obey?" In their eyes, the Ten Commandments look like towering walls blocking freedom's flight. Not light, but chains. But imagine a world where those walls vanish. No longer the commandment, "You shall not kill, you shall not steal." No longer, "Honor your father and mother. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." No longer, "You shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet, you shall not commit adultery." At first, it might feel like relief. But the longer people live in that world, the clearer it becomes. The Ten Commandments are not a prison, but a fence of protection. Not chains, but wings. Not confinement, but shelter. A child might complain that the fence around the yard stops them from running into the street. But that very fence protects them from cars speeding by. The Ten Commandments are the same. What seems like a barrier is truly the wall shielding humanity from the chaos of darkness. In Jungian psychology, this is the process humans face when confronting the shadow, the dark side of the soul. Without law, that darkness pours out and swallows reason. But when we dare to face it, we learn how to integrate the shadow into personality, becoming more mature. This does not mean denying instinct, but guiding and balancing it. The Ten Commandments are the very tools that help humanity do this. For example, the commandment, "You shall not covet," is not meant to forbid you from dreaming, but to stop desire from consuming you. The commandment, "You shall not commit adultery," is not meant to chain love, but to protect love from becoming a passing game. The commandment, "You shall not kill," not only protects the victim, it saves the killer from destroying their own soul. Each commandment carries deep wisdom, teaching humanity to face the darkness within, without letting that darkness reign. When the Ten Commandments disappear, people begin to see how terrifying their absence is. They begin to understand that having laws is not bondage, but protection. That having limits is not the loss of freedom, but the very safeguard that keeps freedom from destroying itself. Think about modern society. With traffic laws, many complain. Too many signs, too many red lights. But if tomorrow all traffic laws vanished, the roads would become a nightmare. Accidents, chaos, panic, all would erupt within hours. And in that moment, people would realize those annoying rules save millions of lives every single day. The Ten Commandments are the same. Not to hinder you, but to protect you. Not to extinguish desire, but to guide it. Not to limit, but to set free. Jung once emphasized, "Without darkness man cannot grow, but without limits the darkness will devour the soul." It is through these commandments that humanity learns how to master instinct, turning chaos into order, turning instinct into creative power. So, what is the lesson? Only when we nearly lose something do we see its shining worth. The Ten Commandments are not relics of an ancient culture. They are the invisible fence still protecting us, even when we fail to notice. They are the guiding light, even when we complain the light is too bright. And if tomorrow the Ten Commandments truly vanished, perhaps only then would humanity understand. What we thought were chains are wings. What we thought was a burden is the foundation. What we thought was too ancient is, in fact, eternal value. We have walked through every assumption, each commandment disappearing, each fragment of order collapsing, and now let us look back at the bigger picture. We thought that without laws there would be freedom. But the truth is, only when there are living laws do human beings know what true freedom is. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is the ability to choose what is right, even when what is wrong looks more tempting, not compromising with the darkness, but daring to face it and overcome it. We thought that laws were chains, but the truth is, laws are wings. We thought the 10 Commandments were a burden, but the truth is they are the foundation. We thought they were too ancient, but the truth is they are eternal. Not bondage, but liberation. Not a burden, but a foundation. Not ancient, but everlasting. Picture a river without banks. The water will overflow, destroy, and sweep everything away. But with banks, the river flows in the right direction, becoming a source of life for the fields and for people. Laws, standards, and the 10 Commandments are those riverbanks. Not to stop the water, but to guide it to where it is meant to go. Picture a piece of music without rhythm. The musician plays whatever he wants. The sound becomes chaotic, harsh, stripped of beauty. Only when there is rhythm, only when there is melody, does music become art. The 10 Commandments are the rhythm of humanity's song. In Jungian psychology, this is transformation itself. From lacking, we begin to long for commandments. From dependence, we learn how to live with consciousness. When facing the shadow, humanity no longer fears or denies it. We learn how to integrate it, to master it, and through that, we grow. This is the journey of human maturity. From wild tribes, humans learned to live together through rules. From chaos, we built society. From instinct, we created culture. And from commandments that seemed harsh, we discovered true freedom. Because freedom is not destroying all boundaries. Freedom is understanding that boundaries are the path, not restraint, but direction. Not destroying the ego, but transforming it into part of something greater. When humanity loses the commandments, we fall into darkness. But it is in that darkness that we begin to long for light. It is in the absence that we recognize value. It is in the near loss that we finally understand that the 10 Commandments never grow old. The peak of this journey is awakening. That human beings cannot live by instinct alone, that freedom cannot exist without a moral foundation, that society cannot stand without a shared story, and that the soul cannot find peace without the sacred to guide it. We move from chaos to order, from darkness to light, from instinct to consciousness, from isolated individuals to a connected community. This is the journey of humanity's maturity, a journey that cannot exist without the commandments. And now ask yourself, if tomorrow the 10 Commandments truly vanished, how would you choose to live? By indulgent instinct, or by disciplined freedom, by chaotic darkness, or by guiding light? The 10 Commandments are not merely ancient words carved into stone tablets on Mount Sinai. They were never just cold orders. They are the invisible foundation upholding an entire civilization. They are the frame that keeps society from falling apart. And beyond that, they are the quiet light shining into every soul. You may not remember all 10 Commandments. You may have once thought they were outdated. But look at the world around us today. Violence, deceit, division, emptiness. All of these are signs that when the fundamental principles are forgotten, humanity slowly slides into darkness. The 10 Commandments are not barriers. They are fences of protection, not chains, but wings, not a burden, but a foundation, not ancient, but eternal values. Sometimes people only recognize this truth when they nearly lose it, but you do not have to wait until that moment. Right now, you can choose to look at the 10 Commandments not as rigid lines of text, but as a map guiding the soul. Because true freedom is not the destruction of all boundaries. True freedom is knowing how to live within the wisdom of boundaries. Because true happiness does not come from endlessly chasing desire. True happiness comes from living in harmony with enduring principles. The Ten Commandments do not belong only to the past, they belong to the present, and they will continue to walk with humanity into the future. If you believe these values live on, leave a comment with the word timeless. And if you feel today's message touched your heart, click like to show your support. Share this video so more people can reflect, and do not forget to subscribe to discover more secrets of the Bible. Truths that can transform the way you see life, society, and even yourself, because the journey of seeking truth has only just begun.